intellectual, social, and spiritual domains. And the combination of these is what gives us health. And the second component is it's not just that we miss on one domain and that we need to look into all the domains, but it's the balance between all of them that actually gives you health. So the holistic health concept is the balance between different domains of our health. And this we see in ancient times in almost every country, in every civilization and culture. You see the holistic concept was there. Like in the Greek, they call it as different phlegm or bile, and the combination of these is what they understood as health. The Greek goddess Hygeia lived rationally, health defined holistically, and influenced by habits of living, exercise, environment, and food. If you look at our Ayurveda, it is a combination of Pitta, Kapha, and Vata. And all these doshas, as it is called, the balance between all of them is what gives us health. In the Chinese, we know of yin and yang, the positive and the negative, the balance of this, which gives us health. And so this illness and wellness is a kind of a continuum. From optimum health, we move towards disease when different domains of our well-being is affected. And the difference between wellness and illness is we or I. If I am in the center, often we land up into illnesses. But when I look at myself in the context of the community around, we land up with wellness. Sorry. And disease is the disbalance in these two areas. Either the holistic component is missing, one component is missing. Say, for example, I may be physically very healthy. I eat well, I exercise well, I maintain my body weight. But if I'm stressed in my mind, I'm a short-tempered person, I may land up into diseases because of that domain not being in balance with the rest of my body. And so it is important that all the domains should be looked after and all the domains should be in balance or in equilibrium with each other. And so healing is a process of restoring back these two things, to look into the holistic component of the person and the balance among each of those components. Just quoting a study which was done in a place called Loma Linda. It's called Adventist Health Study. And what they did was they took up the members of the community, more than 10,000 of them, and followed them up for about 7 to 8 years to see what made them healthy or what made them diseased. And when they looked into it, they found that people who were lean in their body weight had an extra 3 to 4 years. Those who did moderate exercise added on 3-4 years to their life, and those who ate fruits and vegetables added on 3 to 4 years. So if you were lean weight, doing regular exercise, eating adequate amount of fruits and vegetables, had almost 10 to 12 years longer than those who did not. So that was an interesting study. A very famous journalist from National Geographic, idea came into his mind. He wanted to visit different parts of the world and see where do people live long. And this person's name was Dan Buettner. He published his findings in the National Geographic. And what he found out is he found certain places in the world where people were living beyond 100 years. Sorry. And he wanted to see what was unique about these people. And when he studied and analyzed, he found that there were certain things which was unique among them, and there were certain things that was common. They found 3 places: Okinawa in Japan, Sardinia in Italy.
Dr. Hansak, just to interrupt you, sorry, are you showing us the other slides?
Are you able to see this?
We only seeing the first slide, sir. Are you?
No, I've been moving a lot of slides.
Yeah,
it didn't move?
It did not move.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, everyone who are attending, we will be sharing these slides post, so you will have the content, and if there's any questions, please include it in the chat, and we'll ensure that Dr. Hansak is able to answer that. Thank you so much, Dr. Samuel.
Are you able to see the slides now?
Yes, sir. Now we are.
Now it's moving?
Yes, please.
Can you see the Adventist health study?
No, we are seeing a screen which is the world map and it shows blue zones.
Okay, so 1 second.
Maybe you want to enable
Can
editing
you,
for this PowerPoint slide. Maybe then you'll be able to advance.
what do you see now? The same slide is there?
No, it's a
This the
world
map
map
is there?
and it says blue zones.
Okay, let me just
Yeah, if you
enable
enable,
editing.
yes, now I think it will be able.
Okay.
Can you reshare, please? Yeah, can you
Yeah.
reshare your, yeah. Yes, we are able to see the world map and it says blue
Right.
zones. Yes.
Blue
Is that the
zones?
right
Okay.
one? Yes. Okay.
Sorry, we missed a lot of slides.
That's
Oh,
okay.
okay. So what I was talking about is just a little go back. So the Adventist health study was done at Loma Linda, and what, as I mentioned, these were the three factors they found added on to their life: a lean body weight, moderate exercise, and fruits and vegetables. If somebody had all the three, had about 10 to 12 years more. Other slides visible now? Okay, the longest living people groups, is it there? Okay, okay, sure. So this was Dan Buettner, the journalist of National Geographic, and he found out these places where people were living more than 100 years, and he called these places as blue zones. So that's a term he coined it, where people lived more than 100 years, and these were in Japan, Okinawa, in Italy, Sardinia, and in Loma Linda in North America. And they found what was common among them was what was summarized as these people were mainly feeding on a plant-based diet, eating nuts, doing regular exercise, maintaining normal weight, avoiding smoking. The other thing which was also seen is that they were strongly community-based people. If you see in the center, you can see the social engagement was one very important part of a secret of the longevity, and that was something that we did observe in this study. So when we understand the disease model, you realize that health is contributed somewhat by genes. Often we tend to blame the genes, but we'll talk about it. But gene has a part, a small part. A little bigger part is environment, but a very large part is because of the lifestyle that we live. And that is very important. So if you look at the diseases that is common, you can see the topmost disease is the cardiovascular disease. The next is cancers, then the neonatal disorders, people with muscle skeletal, and on the fifth is your mental disorders, and something that we will be touching upon. So among the top diseases, apart from heart disease and cancers, you have mental disorders also on the very top of the diseases. And this is a transition that we have gone through. We didn't have much food to eat, and so we were thin, but the TVs was big. Now the TVs have become slim and we have become fat. And if you have to understand what really happens in our own mental state, what really determines are we mentally in peace, is determined by complex interactions of many things, things that happens in our childhood as we start growing up and interacting, and the environment that influences are a complex things. Try to put it in a simple way. So coming to our main thing is we are looking at the brain and our mind. What really affects or influences the brain and our mind is like the brain, our sun is in the center of our solar system, as nucleus is in the center of a cell and controls every activity of the cell. So is a brain which controls every organ of our body. Anything happening in our brain will affect different parts of our body. We also call this as psychosomatic disorders. People have some chest pain, they think something is wrong in the heart, but in the mind they are stressed and they have symptoms in the heart. Is because the brain is connected with the heart. So brain is just like a computer. We get inputs into the computer processes all those informations, and then the output, it comes out in the screen, printers, speakers. So is our brain. We have about five sensory organs through which we get input to our brains. our eyes, our nose, our ears, our tongue, and the skin. And the output is predominantly in our motor activities. That means how we move our body and what we speak. Other things are inside, we may not be able to see. And if you look at the brain, we have different lobes of the brain. Don't want to take a biology class, but just to understand, the brain that is in the front, which is also called the frontal lobe, is where the execution of all that information which is collected through our different sensory organs are processed and executed to the frontal lobe. So frontal lobe is also called the crown of the brain, and this is the part of a brain which executes certain actions. But more importantly, it is a part of a brain where reasoning, logic, emotions, judgment, morality, everything is decided. So this part of the brain is a very important part, which I just want to emphasize. And if you look at different mammals, you realize that human beings have the largest portion of frontal lobe of the brain. 33% of the brain is frontal lobe as compared to the other mammals, which has lesser. And so what determines or contributes to the brain development is something that we would like to look at it. Now, again, this is a little busy slide talking about various things, multiple things that affects the way our brain develops. We will try to look at it one by one in a smaller way. The maximum development of the brain happens during your first 2 to 5 years. You see, it happens during the first 2 to 5 years. Synapses or the connections between different nerve cells are formed by each experiences that we have. And these experiences stay there for almost a lifetime. Sometimes we wait for our children to grow up before we start teaching them. But remember, what you teach them during those first 5 years are something that remains in the mind and in the brain for a long time. And somebody has said, change the first 5 years and you'll change everything. It's important when you start nurturing your children, it begins much early because these newborn are looking at various things around them and picking things and making them as a part of their life. And that is what really forms their worldview of the way they will look at life. So the whole mental process is their attention, their concentrations, their sensory, their motor skills, the language, the visual, the memory, their ability to solve problem, the ability to make judgment, and the ability to have moral reasoning is a process that begins, as I mentioned, very early in life, in those initial 2 to 5 years. Don't miss that period. Many of us would have with our children. That's very important. And if that is not taken care, today you find children with all these problems. They will say, my child doesn't sit quite, short attention span, lack of concentrations, lack of discipline, gratifications of self. I want it, and they make a tantrum, anger and tantrums. People want to keep away from friends. They are busy with their own gadgets. They blame others for the problems, addiction, suicide attempts. All of them are part of something that was not nurtured to them on those initial years. That is very important. So I would put the brain into two groups, a brain structure and the function of the brain, what affects it, and what should we do to have an optimum mental and emotional well-being. So if you look at the brain structure, basically the brain needs blood for its development, and it needs various nutrients and which comes through various lifestyle factors. And I look at each one of them. If you look at the blood supply, if you look at how our arteries are nice, clean, rounded, and the blood flows it, but then something is there inside. Sometimes there are fat deposited inside our arteries, and these can grow bigger and bigger and reduce the blood supply. And if these blood supplies is reduced to the brain is not able to function. The question is, what causes the fat to be deposited there? We call these as risk factors of atherosclerosis. So the deposition of fat within our... Here's what I found online. Please look at the screen. What we find within the blood vessels is called atherosclerosis. And the reasons or the risk factors for atherosclerosis are genetic, high blood pressures, high sugars, high cholesterols, increased weight, cigarette smoking, and stress. So these are the risk factors for atherosclerosis. The issue is, what are the risk factors for these risk factors of atherosclerosis? And that is what I'm putting it, that the risk factors of those are in our diet, in our physical activity. Now we have some research saying that if you sit continuously for more than 30 minutes, it's almost like smoking a cigarette. Our mental well-being, our social and our spiritual well-being, all of them affects the deposition of fat in our blood vessels. And so we'll go through all those lifestyle factors. Our nutrition, uh, we may have some rough ideas about nutrition, something that we would have studied in our school days. We have carbohydrates, protein, fats, vitamins, minerals, waters. The first three are called macronutrients, means we need to take it in a larger amount. And the other three are called micronutrients. Water is not really micronutrient, we may need in more amount, but vitamins and minerals are micronutrients, we need in a small amount. And if you look at the food pyramid, it basically says which food we need to take in large amount. So there are certain foods we need to take in large amount. There are certain foods that we need to take in small amounts, and that forms the pyramid. We'll talk about it. So carbohydrates are basically the main source of energy, which we get through various cereals and grains. And this is what forms the major bulk of our food. And if in all the things, I want you to remember two things. These cereals or carbohydrate should be eaten whole. So the whole grain should be eaten whole. If you just remember, what I mean to say is, whole grain means don't polish it. We don't know what is the original color of the rice, because since we are born, we have seen rice as white. But rice is actually red. It's when we polish the covering of this rice that makes it white. You need to eat the rice with the covering on top, and that is what we call it as whole grain. And if you look at the rice, of course, the husk should come out. After the husk is the rice bran, which is about 7 to 8%. And then you have the germ and the rice grain. So if you look at the germ, this is what has the fats and vitamins. The bran has got fibers and minerals. Most of the time we are eating endosperm, which is only carbohydrate. So that means when you eat the white rice, you are only getting carbohydrate. You do not get fibers, minerals, vitamins, and fats. So there's a wisdom in eating the rice whole, only then you get all the nutrient. So eating whole grain, eaten whole. Eaten whole means you can look at the wheat, and when you break the wheat, this is a broken wheat, you pound it a little further, it becomes the wheat flour. And if you polish it and ground it, it becomes maida. So the more you process it, the more you refine it, the health value of the food goes away. What do we make from maida? We make naan, we make cakes, you make all the nice things that you can think about. Now, obviously, I'm going to give you a bad news, because I'm basically saying what things that you like, and I'm putting restriction in those foods not to be eaten. So the carbohydrates are divided as simple and complex. So when I said eat whole grain, eaten whole, that means you're eating the food as it is, and these are basically in a complex form. When you process and eat it, it becomes simple. And what's the problem with simple carbohydrates? These gets absorbed in our body very fast. The sugars goes very high, and these sharp shots of sugars going into our blood is deleterious to various organs of our body. What typically should happen is the body should digest these complex carbohydrates slowly, release it into simple carbohydrates, and little by little these carbohydrates should be absorbed in our body. When that happens, that is a nice, beautiful physiological way of absorbing things, rather than everything coming inside our blood suddenly. Study shows that sugar, which is the simplest form, when it just rises into our blood, affects our frontal lobe adversely. And as I mentioned, frontal lobe is a key lobe which just doesn't look after our movements, but also our intelligence and emotions, and that is affected adversely. And people and children who are hooked to sugars, they have behaviors their intellectual functions and their emotional functions are adversely affected. So there's a connection between diet and behavior as more and more people have been looking into it. Sugary junk foods, coffee and its relatives, refined carbohydrates, and all are not good. One of the study called Tidewater study showed when they removed the sugary junk foods, there were 82% reduction in assaults, 77% reduction in thefts, 65% reduction in malicious horseplay, and 55% reduction in refusal to obey orders. So you see, the diet has such an important and a critical role in the way we behave ourselves. The drugs that damages our frontal lobe are illicit drugs, certain prescription drugs, and things like alcohol, caffeine, and nicotine. So caffeine, which is something which has become a part of our life, we can't start a day without it. It produces dependence, causes withdrawal symptoms, can worsen certain psychiatric or mental illnesses, can impair our physical and mental performances. It interferes with sleep, and it has got threshold to other illnesses that can adversely affect the frontal lobe and can affect the part of a frontal lobe which deals with moral issues. And so we do things which are not morally correct and has social impact also. And sometimes excessive of it can also cause death. It affects the brain and can affect the heart also. So the next group of foods are our proteins. And we have two sources of proteins, one from the plant and other from the animal proteins. And proteins are building blocks, much more required when the child is growing. For adults, we need some protein for the wear and tear, but not really much. And so if you look at the plant-based proteins, you have got a variety of it, different colors, textures, lustures, attracted to look at, but generally we have something else that attracts us. We will talk about some components of the protein under the heading of fat. If you look at fat, the fat is broadly classified as saturated fatty acids and unsaturated fatty acids. It may sound like an organic chemistry class, but excuse me, I mean, these are some things that you need to know, because when you go to your store next time, you pick up a food item and try to read the food labels, you need to be aware of certain terminology. So I'm just trying to introduce enough for you to be able to use it. So saturated fatty acids and unsaturated fatty acids. Unsaturated fatty acids are further divided into monounsaturated and polyunsaturated. And these polyunsaturated fatty acids can be further divided as cis and trans. You may ask, why are you teaching us such complex words and all? Broadly, to understand, the best oils are the unsaturated. The worst oil, or the ones which are related to heart disease and cancers, are the saturated fatty acids, right? And among the unsaturated, it's the monounsaturated is the best as compared to the polyunsaturated. Among the cis and trans, the worst is trans. We will look into it. What does these terminologies mean? What is the application of that in my day-to-day life? So the unsaturated, the common sources are from the plant. The saturated are mainly from the animal. And so the animal protein and the animal fat actually is not so healthy and so friendly with our body and causes various diseases. So the saturated fatty acids comes from meat, fish, milk and milk products, butter, cheese, ghee, paneer, all the milk products, and the eggs. Whereas the unsaturated is from the plant source, mustard, groundnut, avocado, soya, canola, olive. All the oils that we usually use are the unsaturated, which comes from the plant source. And if you look at which oil is the best, if you look at the yellow is called monounsaturated. So as I said, the monounsaturated is the best. The next best is the blue one, which is the polyunsaturated, and the worst is the red one, which is the saturated. So except for one oil which comes from a plant source, that is coconut oil, which has maximum saturated, you see all the saturated are from the butter, fat, palm oil, beef tallow, lard. the animal sources. The most ideal oil, if you see, which has got maximum amount of monounsaturated, is the olive oil. The next best is the canola oil. So this is just to give a quick idea about which oil is best for us. Now, the other thing is, when we heat even the plant-based oil, the plant-based oil is usually in the cis isoform. When you heat it, you convert the cis into trans. And as I mentioned, trans is bad. So we convert an oil from cis to trans by two methods. One is by heating, and second is by hydrogenation. And hydrogenation, if you remember, many foods which we like is crispy is because when we make hydrogenate the oil becomes solid. And when the oil becomes solid, it gives you a little crispy taste, which we all like. That crunchy sound that comes is something that we all love, is because of hydrogenation. Unfortunately, those are something that converts a good oil into a bad oil. Now, what the saturated fatty acid does is it reduces the blood supply to the brain and increases inflammation in the nerve cells, which means it destroys our brain. And so we have something that protects us, and these are minerals and vitamins, which are in full amount in fruits and vegetables. The more the color, the better it is. As you see, there are multiple various chemicals which works very hard to douse the fire that is created by many of the unhealthy foods. So you can have a picture that the unhealthy food creates an inflammation of fire within our body, and it is these antioxidants that works very hard to protect us against the harmful effect of some of the diets which are not good. Water, should drink at least 3 liters per day. At regular intervals throughout the day, we should be drinking water. And a power plate is where half your plate should be with fruits and vegetables, and then 1/4 should be grains, and 1/4 should be legumes. Ask yourself how your plate looks. Is it more of grains predominantly and a little bit of legumes and vegetables? You need to change that. You should have 1/4 of fruits, 1/4 of vegetables, and only 1/4 of grains and legumes. This is what has been found in every studies to be the most healthy diet. And water should be, as I said, between meals, drinking water. If Americans ate just one more serving of fruits or vegetables per day, this would save more than 30,000 lives and $5 billion in medical cost every year. Just think about it. The Greeks said, "Let food be thy medicine," Hippocrates, long before our medical science developed. What you should use less in amount is the fat, sugar, and salt. And so if you want to know what is the most ideal meal, 2 to 3 times is sufficient. The largest meal should be your breakfast, less than that should be your lunch, and supper, either you skip it or have something very small. Avoid in between meals, avoid snacks and fast foods, chew your food well, take time to eat your food, avoid water immediately after food. Drink water at least half an hour, 1 hour after your food, and throughout the day, in between meals, the only thing you should do is to walk and drink water. Exercise, most of you know, 50 minutes of brisk walking every day. Either you do it once in the morning or keep walking throughout the day. Study shows physical activity throughout the day is useful. Don't sit, stand, walk whenever you get time. So walking, stretching, and resistance training are the 3 components of a good optimum physical exercise. Do more of aerobics, what we call it as cardiac or pulmonary, and some resistance and some stretchings are good to complete it. Have 30 minutes exposure to sunlight, because through that you get your vitamin D, which is very crucial, not just for your bones, but to your overall immunity. We are talking about COVID, we are talking about immunity. You want to boost your immunity, have at least 30 minutes of sun exposures during the daytime. And avoid things like alcohol, coffee, sodas, refined food, because all of them we call them as empty calories. They do not have any meaningful nutrition. It's just sugars. So avoid these things. Keep away from cigarettes. Have deep breathing exercises that aerates your lungs and gives you enough of oxygen. The most important thing of our life is rest, which we do less. We all human beings want to be human doings. We want to be busy most of the time, and we have less time. But you see, there is a science behind even rest. The time that you sleep is also important. And what they found is in our body, we have a hormone called melatonin. These days, you get tablets of melatonin, which is called sleep hormone. And this starts rising from somewhere around 10 o'clock, peaks at around 12 to 2, and slowly comes down. This is like something that is telling you that it's time to sleep. You get the maximum melatonin if you sleep early, somewhere between 8 to 9 o'clock, right? The later you sleep, the less the amount of melatonin. And melatonin is not just for giving you sleep, but it has been found to protect you against cancer, heart disease, and even depressions. So it's very important that we have good sleep. And how to have a good sleep? The sleep hygiene tells you early to bed, early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. It is very true scientifically. Eat your dinner early, eat your dinner light, avoid stimulants. What are the biggest stimulants in the evening time? Tea, coffee, and TV. The moment you sit before it, your brains are active, your sleep disappears. And most of us are sleeping past midnight. Do not do exercise late in the evening. Preferably exercises in the morning. A little walking after dinner is okay. And next very important thing is sleep in a dark, quiet room. Any amount of light, it decreases the secretion of melatonin. Melatonin is light sensitive. When there is no light, as the sun sets, it becomes dark, melatonin starts going up. You put on your lights at home, put on your TVs and screens, melatonin goes down, your sleep also goes down. So this is something which we call an acronym as New Start. New Start is nutrition, exercise, water, sunlight, temperance, fresh air, rest, and trust in God, the spiritual power. The brain functions development. Just a quick one on the mental and emotional health. We are looking at intelligence. We know what intelligence is. And we think an intelligent person is the most successful person in life. But study shows that it's the emotionally well people who achieve actually higher things in life. And there's a term which is called emotional quotient. What determines it? Our genes, our environment, and what affects it adversely or positively are media, literature, social circles. And all these affects our frontal lobe. And we just talked about what frontal lobe is. So we need to be careful how we look into it. All the things influences in our brain forms our worldviews. And it is this worldview that determines how we will react to people around us, to situations, problems around. Our education, our experience, our personality, our emotions, and social factors, they all contribute towards our worldview. And so the worldview is what shapes our personality, is the way we look at world. This picture, many of you would have seen, it depends on how you look at it, a young girl or an old lady. And it's how you are aware of yourself, how you cope up with things, how you deal with people around with you, your relationships are all that shapes up your personality and also decides how well you do in life. And the impact of the emotional quotient is seen among students, and most of the successful students are the ones with high EQ. And so I've just defined the intelligence and emotions, how we react to people. I'm just moving fast for the lack of time. And just over here, pause few minutes, that it's how we are aware of ourselves, how we manage our own emotions, how we use these emotions to maximize intellectual processing and decision making, and developing empathy. How do we understand the people around us, and how we build up an art of social relationship? These goes a long way in developing a relationship, a networking, and these are the things that determine how successful we are in our life. This is by Daniel Goleman, and I will skip these. So much of a disease is a choice. Yesterday it was disease of affluence, today it's lifestyle disease, tomorrow it will be disease of poor choice. You choose pharmacy or pharmacy. It's not just living long. We have a longest living lady, 121 years, Jane Lucy Calmet. It's not just living long and being healthy. We have a 90-year-old marathoner who has so many records of marathons and someone like this. But you see, it's life lived with meaning and purpose, which makes all the difference in our life. I'll stop here and thank you so much.
So thank you so much, Dr. Hanstak. I think we have a couple of questions. I would like you, if you can. The first one is from Vineet Anand, and he says, some olive oil says that you can heat and cook food. Is it okay to cook Indian food with olive oils?
Okay, so as I mentioned, heating any oils changes the isoforms from cis to trans. Different oils have different thresholds at which they change. I use the term whole food eaten whole. And so I would suggest eat olives instead of olive oil. So I'm just taking you a step further. Olive oil as compared to other oils are good. But you see, a Western concept is you sprinkle a little olive oil on the salads that you have. They don't heat it. The Indian typical way is the first thing that goes into the pan is the oil, and then all the spices, and then the vegetables. So there is a world of a difference the way we do things. The more you heat food, the more the nutrients gets wasted. So I would say, ideal, eat olives. And if you have to use oil, use olive oil. Canola, depending on how you can afford, these are a little expensive. Use it sparingly and use it without heating it. If in case for any particular food that you need to do it, you may do it better than the other oils, but those are in the order of the best and the less than the best.
Thank you, Dr. Hanstak. I hope this helps Vineet Anand. The second question is from Rita, and she says, what other vitamins help with immunity?
You see, vitamins and minerals, we keep understanding and learning more and more. We thought vitamin D was for the bones, but new study shows it is good for the brain, good for the heart, good for the immunity, good for depression. So what the trend that we see is each vitamins has got multiple functions, and that's the beauty of the natural nutrients that we have. They have predominantly certain functions, but they have got lots of other functions, and all the vitamins and minerals actually work like an orchestra, each supplementing each other. So I would say is, I wouldn't focus one thing for one nutrient. I would say take a whole food. I mean, you can't be eating one thing just because you need one thing. You need everything because that's how your body functions. So I would say when you look at the food in a holistic way, take a holistic food. We know certain things that helps. We do not know many things that may be working, ignorant of ourselves. So the safest thing is to take all the things in its natural forming. So the key word that I want to use is God in his wisdom has made things naturally in our environment. If we respect that and take it without using too much of human wisdom and interference, you are most likely to get all that you need.
Thank you, Dr. Hansak. So we have two more questions, and I'm going to add one of them. This is from Susan and Momo. What do you think about using supplements, and can vitamin D be used as a supplement?
Yeah, vitamin D is a big problem. In our hospital, when we checked all our staff, everybody was deficient in vitamin D. We all realize we all sit indoors, we walk indoors. Very few of us, we actually get out. And enough of skin has to be exposed, and those who are dark skinned may need a little larger, longer exposure in the sun. The ideal time of sun exposure is between 10 to 2. That's the time when maximum UV lights are there. UV lights is also a little criticized for skin cancer, but again, that's a little more problem of the West. But now we have more problem of vitamin D deficiencies. So one, you need an adequate exposure of minimum 30 minutes to about 45 minutes in a timing when you have maximum UV light exposure, that is between 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. and enough of skin should be exposed. So in the West, when people wear shorts and t-shirts with enough of skin exposed, that is ideal. But according to our cultural context, we may have to work it out.
Okay. I think this also answers a question from Mr. Sudhir. He had asked, please throw some light on sunlight for vitamin D, such as time of the day, duration, UV rays. And I think you already answered. We have one more question and we'll take in one more after that. Is there
Yeah,
any... Yeah, go ahead,
one more
please.
thing, Pramila. For vitamin D, remember, if you think you're sitting next to your window and the sunlight is entering through your window glass, remember the glass filters the UV light, and so you will not get vitamin D synthesized. So if you need vitamin D, you need to have a full sunlight falling on your skin without passing through glass. So that's one thing I just wanted to add on.
Oh, that's very useful. So this is a question from Dr. Shija, and the question is there any particular nutrients we need to be careful regarding mental health, which are usually lacking in Indian diet, for example, omega-3 fatty acids, magnesium, etc.?
So omega-3 fatty acid has been classically, the source has been put on fish, and we have a lot of fish, cod oils and other things are there. But omega-3, the plant-based source of omega-3 fatty acids are, you have um, flax seeds, and flax seeds, when you use ground flax seeds in various food, you get an adequate amount of omega-3 fatty acids. The problem with fishes these days are because of lot of mercury contaminations and others are coming up over there. Even in Indian coast, they have studied the fishes. They have enough of mercury contamination and something that we call it as bioconcentration. When a fish eats another fish, whatever mercury is there comes into this fish, then the other fish is this fish, then that small fish, the second fish, uh, those mercury also come in. So over a period of time, the mercury gets concentrated in these fishes, and these are becoming a major problem. Second is the way we cook a fish. It's like we love the fish to swim in our oil, and then we take it out and we relish it. So already the oil and the heating of the oil takes away the benefits, whatever some omega-3 fatty acids would be there in the fish. So these are some of the constraints. So you have to figure it out how you would like to fine tune it, but these are the concepts that you have to keep it in mind.
I think those were all the questions. Thank you, Dr. Hansak. It was extremely useful information. We don't realize such nitty-gritty stuff, about how important it is. Health is not building muscles, but it's also very important to be emotionally well. So, and everyone joining in, thank you so much from Sanjeevani and Dr. Hansak. If you would like to have a one-to-one consultation with him, you can always write an email to info@sanjeevaniforyou.com. These information or guidance can be given by Dr. Hansak. And if someone chooses to have an appointment at CMC Vellore, where Dr. Hansak is currently there, they can also please email. We've shared the email in the chat, and the recording of this event and the presentation which Dr. Hansak has shared will also be available on Sanjeevani's website. Once again, Dr. Hansak, thank you for sparing your Sunday afternoon, evening with us, and we appreciate everyone joining in from North America for this Sunday morning. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Pramila. Thank you. Thank you for all that you are doing among the groups over there, and I really appreciate that. It was a pleasure to be a part of your group. Thank you so much.
Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.